Hi everyone, my name is Rob from RobOps, and today we're going to be talking about skills in the context of LLMs and how you can use them to speed up your development. Skills are essentially reusable capabilities that help an LLM perform a specific task more reliably. So instead of just thinking about the model as something that generates text, you can think about its skills as giving it focused ways of working, whether that's summarizing information, extracting data, generating code, or interacting with tools. The big idea is that skills make LLM behavior more structured, repeatable, and useful inside real applications. In today's demo, we're going to take the game we've been working on from the last video and add a feature. Specifically, we're going to create an eat mechanic where our character can click food items from their inventory to recover health. We'll develop this feature completely using skills and show the power of focusing LLMs to generate value. So if we look at our game, we currently have some enemies. They're wild boars, and we do have a combat mechanism. So if I approach one of these boars, I can engage in combat. But you'll notice that as I do damage to this boar will also do damage back to me. And we have no mechanism in the game currently to heal our hit points as they go down over time. And so what we want to do with this feature is add functionality to allow us to eat during combat so that if our health approaches 0, we're able to defend against it using food. And so before we actually jump into the building of the feature, I'm just going to go briefly over the skills that I'm going to be using. Now, these skills were all borrowed and put together through existing skills that have been posted by other creators. And so I will make sure to post those links to where I got the inspiration for a lot of these. But the first one I'm going to click through is called Write a Product Requirements Document. And so this skill will effectively allow us to create almost a one-pager for the feature we want to build. So in our case, we're going to be wanting to build a new item where when the player interacts with that item, they will gain health points. The second piece of this is we're then going to take our PRD and break it into issues. And so in this flow, we're going to take our one-pager, and this skill is going to help us break it up into logical vertical chunks of functionality. And this functionality is what we're going to ask the LLM to build on top of. And finally, when it gets to the actual building part, we're going to use this thing called TDD. And so this is called test-driven development. And what this is going to do is it's going to build tests, and then the tests will fail, and then it will build the functionality to get that test to pass. And so this skill is going to ensure that as our LLMs develop this application, it will develop it with a suite of tests so that when we make different changes down the line, we'll be able to spot regressions much more easily. So that's going to be the flow. We're going to create a PRD for the skill. We're going to break that PRD into issues. And then we're going to use test-driven development to implement those issues one by one. So here I am in the terminal, and I'm going to start a Claude session. And now what I'm going to do is let's write a new PRD using the write-a-prd skill. And so we can see it's picked up our write-a-prd skill. And now we are going to walk through this skill. So tell me what you want to do. So this is kind of the first iteration for everything I can think of for the food. But if we click enter, Claude is going to take a look at our description. It's going to look at the code base, and it's going to try to ask us some clarifying questions. And so as you can see, we've been asked some clarifying questions. So we're going to go through these 1 through 6, and we're going to provide our responses. So we've responded to all of the questions we've been asked, and we're going to submit this. All right, so it has everything it needs. And now it's going to create the PRD as a GitHub issue. So we have a PRD written, and we have a link to that PRD. And so if I click this, and this is the output. So as you can see, we have a problem statement, and this problem statement defines the concept of food. And it's also generated 15 user stories. And each of these user stories is going to be crucial to creating the actual issues that we need as we implement them. So in the next step, we're going to use the issues from PRD skill to generate a bunch of issues based on this PRD. So if I'm happy with this PRD, I can continue. If I'm not, I can edit it. But because we're fine with it, what I'm going to do next is generate the issues. And so what I'll say is, can we use the prd-to-issues skill to break this prd up? And so now we're going to see the skill invoked, prd-to-issues, and it might ask us a few clarifying questions, but it's going to effectively read the prd, and it's going to break this down into manageable chunks. And it's also going to reference the user stories that we saw in that prd. And so here it's going to break it up into 4 different issues. So food and item data, server eat and handle time, client inventory eat action, and green heel splat. And so this looks good to me. And so what I'm going to ask is looks good, and it will then go ahead and break this into issues. And then now it's also going to update our PRD to reference the issues it's just created. So now we have 4 issues that have been created. And if we navigate back to GitHub, and these are all of the issues. But as you can see, I've been doing this, and this is how the development has been happening on this game. I have an NPC feature that I've been working on next. And what we're going to do is take each of these issues and we're going to start developing them. So here we are back in our IDE. We have our game development repo loaded, and we have our front end and our server running. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to open up our Claude code session, and we're going to say, let's get started on item 203. And so basically what it's going to do is it's going to take that issue, it's going to read the context, and it's going to create the additions that we need. So as you can see, it's going to create a new item in our items.json for the cooked boar meat. It's going to do that on the client as well, and it's done. And so before we move ahead, we do want to test this as best we can. As you can see here, we have the new item, and it's registered as item ID 7. So I click give, I'll get an item in my inventory, and if I click it, I can see examine. If I click eat, nothing will happen because we haven't implemented it yet, but I can drop it, and I can click it, and I'll notice an issue here. The pop-out box is too small, and so what I'm going to do next is go back to our session, and I'm going to ask it to fix that. For this next issue, 204, let's continue. Please use the TDD skill and create a PR for this change and future changes. Simply because it's a good way for us to segment what's actually going into our main branch so that we can pick out things that aren't working as we might expect them. And so here it will load the TDD skill, and it should walk through the development of the feature. And so now it'll start implementing the tests. The tests will fail, and then it will implement the code itself. So the test failed. Now we're going to implement the logic. And there we go. So it should be ready, and now it should open a PR with the 265 tests passing. So we have our server-side tests passing. We have about 265 because we've been developing different features, but we also have client-side tests. And so for those, we have a GitHub action that is running in the background on each push to our remote branch. And so that will validate that none of our client-side or Godot code has been broken as a result of these additions. So here's the PR that was created, and it adds the cooked boar meat item, and it implements the handle eat. And so as you can see, the test plan, because it's a lot of server side, it's just going to have our tests. And if we give the food, as we saw in the last feature, it will create the food in the inventory. So we have a few others as part of 205 that will complete the actual eating action. Because of all of our tests are passing, we're just going to merge this PR, and we're going to go back to our code view. And we're going to go back to our session, and we are going to say, let's start with 205. Please create a new branch and PR for this feature and use TDD. And so after a bit of back and forth, the feature is complete. We have added, I think, 9 new tests, and we have a PR up here. I can see that we have the wiring of the server-side code. So we have the inventory UI, which is the eat request. We have the network signal, the main, and we have 3 new tests added. So the next step here will be to test this out. So if we go into our game window, we've spawned a few pieces of food in and we're attacking a boar. I'm gonna click food and I can see it's healed my character, which is exactly what we wanted to do. So I actually wanna go below 5 hit points. So as you can see, it took 2 game ticks for it to process the food. So all that being said, the feature is working as expected. And so we've gone through the process of TDD, and we have 245 tests passing. So now we're going to create the PR for the final feature here. And we have our PR. Okay, so now we are back in our world, and I'm going to spawn some food into my inventory. I'm just going to come up to this boar and I'm going to start attacking. And what I'm looking for is 2 things, actually just one thing. One thing is just the green splat with a +1, which is great. Great. +2. Okay, so I'm pretty satisfied with that PR. And I'm just gonna go through here and double check and confirm and squash. So we've completed all of the issues. And so effectively now we have a system for our game to enable eating, which is a pretty cool piece of functionality, obviously very critical during combat and things of that nature. And we developed it all using skills. Skills helped us structure our thoughts. It helped us break those thoughts into manageable chunks that we could attack. And then it also helped us iterate through. And a key part of iterating is, in my mind, having tests, because the tests are what is going to give you the stable foundation to continue building and making sure that what you're building isn't brittle. And so as we go back to the slides, we'll explain kind of some of the pitfalls of this approach and some of the benefits. One limitation is lack of code ownership. If you rely too heavily on LLM-generated skills, it becomes easy to end up with code or logic that works, but that no one really feels responsible for or fully understands. And that becomes a problem the moment something breaks or needs to be extended. The second limitation is that the small changes can become bigger than expected. Even a simple adjustment can be hard to make when the skill starts overanalyzing the request, adding extra logic, or drifting beyond the original intent. So instead of a quick update, you can end up with spending more time correcting the behavior than you expected. And with that said, that wraps up today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching today. And if you did find this interesting, please consider liking and subscribing. And I hope you have a great week. Thanks.